And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather showing scattered thunderstorms diminishing over the interior and a few showers lingering over the southeast coast. Out to the west, high pressure in the Bering Sea continues to hold. Storm system, though, beginning to push some rain in toward the west central Aleutians late tonight. And then tomorrow, pretty good winds coming in with this front and low pressure area, anywhere from 25 to 35 knot winds, maybe gusts to 45 miles an hour. Otherwise, northern, eastern Bering Sea, light winds, dry conditions, all the way up into the Chukchi Sea. Afternoon thunderstorms developing here over the interior again, mainly along a couple of trough axes here, and maybe as far south as the Kenai Peninsula again, and about a 20 to 40% chance of a scattered shower or two for the southeast coast. That should end for the most part for the day on Tuesday there with partly sunny skies. Scattered thunderstorms over the mountainous terrain again over the interior with a lot of clearing and still warm temperatures, 70s to lower 80s. And all the way up to the Arctic coast, should be a mostly sunny day. Otherwise, gale force winds coming in with this front here from the eastern Aleutians pushing into the Alaska Peninsula up to the Pribilof Islands, and definitely gale force winds wrapping back around here into Adak and Atka out of the northwest. And a pretty good shot of rain associated with this as well. Coastal water forecast, southeast coast, light variable winds along the south coast 5 to 10 knots, south 10 knots on the central coast, north coast variable winds 5 to 10 knots. Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, south winds at 10 knots for the day Monday, southeast at 10 for Clarence Strait. And for Tuesday, variable winds 10 knots here for the south coast and the central coast northwest 10 to 15 knots. 5 to 10 knot winds out of the west for the north coast. And for Lynn Canal, south winds 10 knots, Stevens Passage southeast at 10 and south at 10 for Clarence Strait. Prince William Sound and the North Gulf Coast, light variable winds again for the day Monday with seas running anywhere from 2 to 3 feet. Prince William Sound, Cook Inlet, southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, seas up to 5 feet south of the Forelands, and for Kamishak Bay, south at 15, Barren Islands, southeast at 15 knots. Then for the day Tuesday, Prince William Sound, southwest at about 10 knots, and east winds 15 knots for the North Gulf Coast, seas 2 to 3 feet. Small craft advisories now developing for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay. Southeasterlies 25 knots. Cook Inlet south to southwest at 15 knots. And for the Alaska Peninsula for the day Monday, variable to northwest winds at 10 to 20 knots, southwesterlies at 20 knots for the Bristol Bay area, and variable winds 10 to 15 knots for Kodiak Island. And then for Tuesday here, gale warnings, Bristol Bay and the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula for southeast winds 35 to 40 knots. Small craft advisories for the Pacific side of the peninsula, southeast winds at 30 knots and 25 knot winds for Kodiak Island. And for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, variable winds 10 to 20 knots, Adak and Atka, winds increasing, small craft advisories now. East winds 25 to 30 knots and east-northeast 25 to 35 knots here for the western Aleutians. Then on Monday, western Aleutians here, northwest 30 to 40 knots, and gale warnings for the Adak-Atka area and the Fox Islands for Adak and Atka here in the central Aleutians, southwest 35 to 40 knots. Eastern Aleutians, southwest to southeast winds 30 to 35 knots. And for the southwest coast, north winds 15 to 20 knots for the day Monday. St. Lawrence Island, northwest at 15, west 15 for Norton Sound. Light variable winds here for the northern Bering Sea and the Pribilof Islands. And for the Tuesday outlook, gale warnings now. St. Matthew Island, northeast 35 knots. East winds 30 knots for the Pribilofs. And good gales here for the Kuskokwim Delta coast. 45 knots out of the southeast, seas at about 8 feet. Much lighter, though, for the Yukon Delta coast, southeast at 15. East winds 15 knots for St. Lawrence Island. Light northeast breeze at 10 for Norton Sound. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east to northwest winds at 10 knots. Northeast at 15 for the central and western Arctic coast. And the Chukchi Sea, west winds 10 to 15 knots. And for the Chukchi Sea on Tuesday, east to southeast winds at 10 knots, northeast at 10 for the western Arctic coast. And for the central and eastern Arctic coast, east to northeasterlies, 10 to 15 knots.